So the last couple weeks, I have not been putting up any content on my channel. And the reason for that is that I've really wanted to take this time where so much stuff is happening right now in the United States and take that time to listen to Black creators and the news and just learn how to be a better ally for the Black Lives Matter movement. And I've just been, trying to listen and educate myself and also just figure out what I can do because there's just so much that needs to be done, so many steps that need to happen to make a difference. And it's hard for one person to figure out what they can do. And I know there are a lot of people, talking about donating and signing petitions. And I think that stuff is great and that you should do that. I will put a link down below, and that is great. And even if I do those things, they are personal and private, so they're not like something that I want to talk about here, because that's more about me and like what I don't know. It doesn't seem like as public of something to do, and it doesn't seem like enough. And I have this platform. I know it's a small one. I'm not a huge channel by any means, but it is a platform. And I should be using this channel that is part of the book community to talk about Black authors, to show my support for books by buying them or reviewing them, talking about them on my channel. And I was going back and forth how I want to do that. I was originally thinking I would give you recommendations about books I've read in the past, but I still think that's about me. And I want to also get people to find more Black creators on YouTube, more Black booktubers. So what I want to do today is share books that I am interested in reading. And so somebody that watches my channel, maybe you are interested in the same genres as I am. So I'm going to break down these books by genre. Part of that is because I think it's great. I've seen a lot of videos of people saying how they went out and bought like a bunch of books by Black authors, which is great. But if you don't read them, that's a problem, because we should be reading and reviewing them and talking about them and promoting them. And so I think that by talking about these in terms of genres, if you are somebody that likes sci-fi fantasy and that is something that you read regularly, by giving you some options that are written by Black authors, that's something that we can then have a long-term goal of incorporating more diversity in that genre that we already read. If you never read historical fiction, but you're like, oh, I've heard all these great historical fiction that are written by Black authors, but then you never read them because that's not your genre, that's not doing anything. So I wanted to separate this out by genres. These are going to be genres that I generally read. So obviously, if you're somebody watching me, maybe you read the same genres that I do. What I also want to do is that when I talk about these books, since I haven't read them yet, I can't review them. So if you find any of these synopses interesting, what I'd really like you to do, and what I'm going to do as well, is type these books into the search part of YouTube and find Black reviewers that have read them and watch their videos. And then what hopefully is what I want to come from that is that not only are you learning maybe about new books you didn't know about by Black authors, but then you're also finding new booktubers that you can follow that do genres that you also read. So you're matching up with personalities that you would continue to support long run. Because the other thing I've heard from a lot of people is that Black booktubers is that they're getting a lot of new subscribers right now, but they're worried that they're going to lose those subscribers in a month when it's no longer trendy to sign up for subscribe to all these Black booktubers. And that's not what they want. They want, interaction, and they want people to be subscribed to them because they like their content. And so I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, or I'm just trying to make a step to connect people to more content written by Black authors and also more content reviewed by Black reviewers. And hopefully that's just one step that we can take to be allies and to be more diverse in our reading, because I also am telling you that all of these are going to be fiction books, and not that you shouldn't be reading nonfiction, but the reason I'm only going to talk about fiction is because I think that you can go anywhere and search for nonfiction books about race right now, because it's, the lists are everywhere. I've seen them all over Instagram and Facebook and just a Google search. And so I think that's great, and we should be reading nonfiction. I know I'm going to be getting some from the library and listening to some audiobooks that are nonfiction. But I also think that most of us, or at least I can only speak for myself, I only read maybe like out of 10 books that I read, only one is probably going to be nonfiction, just because that's just my taste. I like to read fiction stories, but you can still learn so much from a fiction book, especially if it's written by somebody that has a different experience than you. So by reading diversely, you are learning about other experiences in the world from somebody that doesn't maybe look like you or live the same experience that you do. So I think it's important to be lifting up fiction authors at the same time that we're talking about these nonfiction books that we are learning from. I think fiction is just as important. So I'm going to get into the list. I do have my computer here, so if I'm looking over, that's because I'm checking the list, making sure I get through them all. So I'm going to start off with sci-fi fantasy. So these are probably because these are the ones I'm most excited about. I really like the sci-fi fantasy genre. So the first one I want to talk about, and the first author, I have 2 books by her I want to talk about. And the first is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. She writes sci-fi books and speculative fiction. I think this one leans more towards speculative fiction than sci-fi. And it's about a woman who is a modern Black woman, though I think in that modern times is the 1970s. And she somehow is sent back in time to the antebellum South and ends up, I believe, saving a white man or a white boy. And then like her experience of being like transported back and forth in time and how that feels for a modern Black woman. I've heard amazing things about this book, and I really want to pick it up soon. The other book by this author that I want to read is The Parable of the Sower. I'd heard somebody reviewing this recently, and it just sounds like something I'd be really interested in because it's a post-apocalyptic book, which is a genre that I've really gotten into lately. So I'm very excited to pick this up. I don't know a lot of details about the plot other than I think it follows a young woman whose father is a preacher, and then her leaving the home where she's from and kind of having to survive. So I think it's kind of like survival and a post-apocalyptic. The next author I want to talk about is N.K. Jemisin, who also writes kind of a combination of sci-fi and fantasy books. And the first one I want to mention is called How Long Till Black Future Month. And this is actually a collection of short stories, which if you follow me and have seen my past videos, I don't usually like collections of short stories. But this one sounds interesting to me because the short stories that I do usually enjoy are things that are more like futuristic, more about the future of technology, almost Black Mirror-like, you know what I mean? Where it talks about futuristic possibilities, more speculative. And that's what this is. There's a lot of stuff that's, I think it's a wide range of some are sci-fi, some are speculative, some are futuristic. And so it just sounds really interesting. And she's an author that I hear about all the time on BookTube. And so I'd really like to try out this collection of short stories and get kind of a sampling of her different genres and type of work. And then the other like long form one I want to read by her is The Fifth Season, which is the first book in the trilogy. I believe it's called the Broken Earth trilogy. And this is another that's post-apocalyptic, and I think it's like taking place after the world, this fantasy world is destroyed and kind of people rebuilding and all that stuff. I've heard really great things. I actually tried starting this book, but I tried on audiobook and I only got about 1 chapter in, and I think the audiobook was just, no, actually I got like 4 chapters in, because I know I heard from different perspectives, but the like fact that it was from different perspectives and different perspectives were written in different types of style, because there's like one that's written in second person, and so it was hard for me to follow the audiobook, so I really just want to get a physical copy of this series and start reading it. And then the last in this genre I want to talk about is actually, I don't know if this is considered middle grade or young adult, like young adult, and that is Akata Witch. And there's a sequel called Akata Warrior by Nnedi Okorafor. And this duology is about a girl who lives in Nigeria, but she was born in New York City, and she's an albino. And I believe that it involves magic and her being in a magic school, and it looks like that they're also helping to track down a criminal. So it just sounds like a really fun, like, book about magic schools and investigating things. And I also just wanted to pick this up because I had read the Benti trilogy from Nnedi Okorafor, and I thought her writing was so good. And even though I didn't love necessarily the direction that that series went in, the first book I still would say is one of my favorite novellas, like short form fiction. And so I'm really excited to be picking up her full books and picking up this duology. And sorry, my husband has decided to mow the lawn right outside this window. So hopefully you can still hear me as I move on to the next genre. So the next genre I want to talk about is historical fiction. And I know I said at the beginning of this, I don't usually read historical fiction. And I don't like, it's not one of my favorite ones, but if I find something that sounds really interesting to me, I might absolutely love it. I just don't necessarily read it as like one of my top genres, but I do have 3 books I wanted to talk about, all of which I am very interested in reading. And the first one is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, and this was everywhere a couple years ago. And I believe it is following several generations of a family. I think it starts off with 2 sisters, and they go off to lead very different lives. It starts off in Ghana, and one of them then marries an Englishman and moves somewhere else. And then the other one, I believe, stays in Ghana. And then following these 2 families as they have kids in their different generations. And I just would really like to get to this one. And then the next one is a middle grade book called Stella by Starlight by Sharon M. Draper. And I've heard that she also writes several other books that have received awards and things like that, and they're really popular in middle grade fiction. And this is taking place in the segregated South. And Stella has not really had a lot of run-ins with racism, being a young girl and just not having had that experience yet. But then one night she is outside with her young brother and they see something that they don't really understand, and then it kind of brings in that topic of conversation about the community and racism in the community. And so I really want to read this one this summer. There could be, I'm not going to announce it yet, but there could be a readathon that this will work with involving middle grade fiction. So I do really want to get to this one this summer. And the last one is one I don't own yet, which is Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanta. And I have the description here because I can never remember exactly what it's about, but I keep hearing great things about it, so I do want to pick it up. And it takes place in Nigeria, and it's about a girl who is coming to age at the same time that her nation is going through a civil war, and she gets displaced from her town into another community and makes friends with a young girl and kind of is developing feelings for this young girl. So it's also an LGBTQ plus novel, and kind of how that is in historical Nigeria. And it just, I've heard that the writing is beautiful, and so I do really want to get to that one. And so now we're going to move on to more contemporary novels. And even though these are all contemporaries, there are kind of sub-genres. So I'm going to talk about a couple romance books first. And one romance book that I'm actually probably going to start tomorrow is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. And this one seems like a fun romantic comedy. It's about a young woman who has fibromyalgia, and she has been living kind of more of a safe life, like trying to deal with her illness, but she realizes that she needs to get out there and try new experiences, or she's living too much of a sheltered life. And so I think she teams up with the maintenance man in her apartment building or something like that, and that they kind of accomplish all these things on her list, and I think they fall in love. Is what I'm assuming for the fact that it's a romance. And there's actually a sequel to this book that I don't remember the title, so I'll put a picture of it here. And I believe it follows Chloe's sister. And so I'm excited to get into this series because I've heard that it's a lot of fun and a sweet romance. And then the other romance series that I really want to start is the Reluctant Royal series by Alyssa Cole. And the first one is called A Princess in Theory. And I think in this series there are 3 full-length books and 2 novellas. And most of them involve some kind of royal whether the person doesn't know they're royal or somebody that is royal. And they're like definitely adult romance books. Like I think there is definitely more sexy times in this if that's something you're not interested in. But I've just heard that they're a lot of fun. So I do want to get started on this series, and probably will be doing this in terms of audiobooks from the library. And then I want to talk about a couple that would probably be put under the category of thriller or mystery crime novels. And the first one is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. And this one, exploded on BookTube last year, so probably a lot of people have heard of it. And I think it's a shorter one too, so I would like to get to that one soon. And it is a sister who has to clean up the murders of her other sister, and it takes place in Nigeria. And then the next one that's kind of more of a crime book is called Bluebird by Attica Locke. And I believe Attica Locke actually has quite a few mystery crime books, and I hadn't really heard of her before, and that's a genre that I really enjoy, so I do want to start reading her books. And this one specifically takes place in Texas, and the main character is a black Texas Ranger, and he has to solve this crime that involves two murders. That one is a black lawyer from Chicago and one is a local white woman. And I guess it says in the description that it is a timely novel about the collision of race and justice in America, and it is written kind of in a noir feel. So that sounds really interesting, so I do want to get to that. And then I have just some books that I would categorize as just general contemporary fiction, and I'm going to talk about them in order of age groups. So I'm going to start with adult novels, because some people prefer to read just adult books, and then I'll get to young adult and then middle grade. So in terms of adult books, the first one I want to talk about, which I have been putting off for personal reasons, is My Name is Leon by Kit de Waal. And I read the first chapter of this in a triad chapter, and I really want to read it. But I've been putting it off because it does involve adoption in the foster program, and that is something that hits home for me, but that shouldn't stop me from reading books that are really important. So I do want to get to this summer. And this is about two brothers that have been abandoned by their birth mother, and one is lighter skinned, so he gets adopted pretty quickly, and the other one, who has a more dark toned skin, gets put into the foster system. And just following those two and how that affects their lives. And so I do need to get to this. I think it'll be a really important book to read. And the next one is two books by the same author, and this is the author I've read before, but I've only read her nonfiction, and so I really want to read her fiction, and that's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And I have read two of her feminist nonfiction books and absolutely love them, so I really want to get to her fiction. And the first one is a collection of short stories called The Thing Around Your Neck. And my nephew just read this for class, and he said it was really good. And even though I'm not a big short story person, because I've read her nonfiction, I really do want to try this one. And I've heard a lot of the stories, I'm looking at the description, says that the stories are about collision between two cultures and the human struggle to reconcile them. So I think because she has a lot of them taking place in both Nigeria and America, it's kind of the mix of those cultures. And then the other book by her I want to read is Americanah. And this is a huge one, which is why I haven't started it yet, but I did order it from the library, so I really hope I can get past the fact that it's a huge book. And this is about a couple who, in a post 9/11 world, are separated because the woman goes to live in New York, but he is not able to move to the States at that time, so he moves to London instead. And I think it follows a 10-year span of time with their relationship and living in different places and things like that. And I've just heard really great things about it, so I do want to get to that one. And then those are all of the adult books, so let's move into young adult books. And the first one is All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley. And I also read the first chapter of this in a triad chapter. And this is going to be one that's going to break my heart again. It is about police brutality, so it is very timely to write now. And I just need to get past the fact that we are going to have to sit in our uncomfortability when reading some of these books in order to learn about other people's experiences. And that's something that I need to push past. I'm not saying that all we should read is books that challenge us, because sometimes you just need an escapist, fun book. But it's also important to read those books that challenge you and push you out of your comfort zone. This is one of those, and I just need to like push myself to read it because, like I said, it's about a young boy who deals with police brutality, and it's from two perspectives. The one who is a black teenager gets accused of something by a police officer, and then there's a white teenager who was there and saw the whole interaction, and like just it's both of their stories and how they differ and how they come together and all that. And so yes, I need to push myself to read this because I think this is a very important read. And then the next one is On the Come Up by Angie Thomas, who obviously is the author that wrote The Hate You Give. I also want to read The Hate You Give, but since I own this book, I might read this one first. I don't know if anybody has read them out there, and let me know if I have to read one after the other. I didn't know. They're not in the same series, but there might be some characters. But this is about a young girl who wants to be I think she wants to be a rapper. Yeah, so, and it follows her experience. I think I want to try to get this on audio because I heard that the audio does have some of the music in it, but I have the book that I could follow along with as well. And then I have two books by the same author, and that author is Elizabeth Acevedo. I had read With the Fire on High by her and thought it was really good, and her narration of the audiobook was excellent. And so I want to read her two books that are written in verse. One has been out for a while, The Poet X, and so many people have said how good it is, and I definitely want to get that one on audiobook since it's about slam poetry, and I think that would be really well done in an audiobook. And the other one is Clap When You Land, which is a brand new release, so you might not have heard about it. And I actually have the ebook out from the library right now, so hopefully I can review it soon. And this is about two young women who a plane crashes and they find out that their father died on that plane, and it's dual perspective from each of them and how they relate to each other and their experience with their father dying on this plane. So I think it's going to involve grief as well. And since her writing, I just heard so many good things about. I really want to get to this one soon since I have it from the library. And then I also have from the library the audiobook for The Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. And this is another one that I have put off because I know it's not going to be a comfortable read, but I think it's an important one. And it's only like 2.5 hours long. And it is about a young man whose brother has been shot, and the ride that he takes in an elevator as he wants to get revenge, and his feelings about his brother's death and things like that. And it is a short book, so I'm going to get to it this week and review it soon because I've heard a lot of people talk about it. And then one that I don't hear about as much is Slay by Brittany Morris. And this is about a young woman who develops a game, which, first of all, books about women in STEM are ones that I'm really interested in. So that is what excited me about this book. And she writes this, develops this game. And some people, even though she is a black woman, a lot of people are saying that it is a racist game and are sending her mean messages. Her family doesn't know that she's the game developer. And so I think it involves a lot of her figuring out how to tell people that she has the one in charge of this game, and it has a lot of information, a lot of plot line about racism and racial injustice in the gaming field. And the next one is Finding Yvonne by Brandy Colbert, and this one I believe is about a woman or young girl who is about to go to college, and she is really good at the violin, but she doesn't know if she's good enough to get into a conservatory, and so she's dealing with that, trying to figure out where she's going to go to college or school, whether she's going to stick with violin as her career, when I believe she meets somebody and becomes pregnant, and so then that ends up in the mix of what she's going to do about her pregnancy and her future. And then the last one that is a young adult is Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. And I don't know much about this one. I think people generally keep the synopsis vague on purpose. But so all I know is that it's about a teenager who goes to school and her best friend does not show up. And then her trying to figure out where her best friend went, and that nobody's talking about the fact that her best friend Monday is not in school and has disappeared. I don't really know what other content is going to be in this book, but I've heard really good things about it, so I do want to pick that up. And then I have 2 middle grade books that I am really interested in reading. And the first one is called Clean Getaway by Nick Stone. And I've only heard really great things about this book. And it is about a young Black boy who goes on a road trip with his white grandmother. And they go through the South. And she is sharing with him experiences about the South during the 70s and about racial issues during the 70s in these different locations that they travel around to together. And I've just heard the like grandmother-grandson relationship is so good, and I've only heard great things about this book. And then the other middle grade one I want to read is Hurricane Child by Case & Callender. And there's actually several books by Case & Callender that I am interested in. So this is just the first one I want to read and then move on to the rest of their work. And this one, I believe, is about a girl who was born on an island during a storm. And so she is considered unlucky and she is hated by other people in her school. Sorry, I'm looking at the description because I couldn't remember all of it. And she is also determined to find her mother. So it looks like it's involving a lot of different topics. And then I think there is also a new girl that comes to school, and our main character, Caroline, dealing with her feelings about the new girl in school as well. So this is also an LGBTQ plus story as well. So those are all the books I want to talk about today. These are just the ones that I have had on my TBR that I'm really interested in. Like I said, if you want to know more about these books, what I really encourage you to do is search for Black reviewers, whether that's booktubers, whether that's book bloggers that are reviewing these from their perspective, and learn from them whether you are interested in these books more and into reading them, and also to find some new content creators to follow that have the same interest in books that you do. And hopefully this will be one step we can take to be better allies and to diversify our reading in the book community. I would love to hear from you down below if you have more recommendations from me based on genres that I enjoy, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.